My guest this week is a recently graduated K senior, Rukudzo Gawa. He is somebody who I have had the great pleasure of knowing for the last 4 years and watching him grow up and work in our office. And I wanted him to come onto the podcast this week so that we could have a really interesting conversation because during his time here at K, he's always managed to score a lot of really, really good internships. And I thought it would be really useful to have him talk about his experience on how to find them and provide you students with some information on you could learn from him on how to find internships on your own. So Rukudzo, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much, Richard.
So, like I said, I've been really looking forward to have this conversation because we've had and developed a friendship over the past 4 years, and it's just like I said, been really amazing to just like watch you kind of like grow up from a first year and then like get these like really amazing opportunities. And so I'm really excited for us to have this conversation, and you can talk a little bit about like how some of these came to be. Um, so the very first question I'm going to ask you is that for those listeners who don't know, you are an international student from Zimbabwe, and I'm really curious about like how you learned about K and what brought you to us. And for a little bit of background, I always like asking this question because as somebody who grew up in Michigan, about an hour and 10 minutes or so south of here,
Uh-huh.
I had no idea that Kalamazoo College even existed until I moved to Kalamazoo. So I'm always so fascinated to hear about like international students like, wow, you're from this entirely different country. How did you hear about this? So how did you learn about K
Okay,
and
I
what brought
see,
you
I
here?
see. Yeah, most definitely. So I actually didn't know about Kalamazoo as well. But I got lucky because in my final year of high school, I got selected along with about 41 other students to take part in a program called USUP. It's run by an organization called Education Matters in Zimbabwe, United States Students Achievers Program. So basically, they will select about 35 to 50 students who are graduating from high school from across the nation based on a couple of criteria, including academic excellence, leadership potential, ethos of giving back, and economic disadvantage. Because what they're really about is about choosing high achieving low income students and assisting them with applications to institutions outside of Zimbabwe. So when I took part in the program, what happens is we all have to sort of give the counselor a lot of context about who we are, or profiles, academics, and everything else. So, and then at the end of the day, you end up applying to about 3 or 4 schools. So I actually didn't know about Kalamazoo in the first place. And I was actually supposed to be applying to Michigan State and Wisconsin, which I actually did apply to. I had an interest in big schools. So there's actually somebody who works in the admissions office who often comes to recruit in Zimbabwe because he has a lot of connections with many organizations from around the world, China, Jamaica, you name it. His name is Roddick Malcolm.
Yep.
So he came and they were like, so they were speaking to my counselor. Her name is Rebecca. And they were like, Rebecca, do you remember in 2014, we had one of your students graduate from K. His name was Tendai. We'd really like to see if you're sending in another student to apply this year. So that's how I learned about Kalamazoo, and I applied for it. So Rebecca was like, yeah, this is Kalamazoo. Tendai from your high school went here, and he did really great. He works at Morgan Stanley right now. Maybe if you want to read, you can get this book called Colleges That Change Lives.
Oh
I
yeah.
kind of looked a little bit, and that's when I saw Kalamazoo featured in the book as well. So that's how I learned about K.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually have that book too. Um, so as I said up top, I've known you for a long time, and kind of how we first originally met was you had applied to for an internship stipend, and you got it, and then we kind of developed our friendship off of that. And so, even as a first year, um, you have always been really good at finding internships.
Yeah.
And so can you talk to and let people know about like all the various internships you've had during your time here, Kay?
Okay. Yeah. So during my time at K, as a first year, I interned with a marketing firm right out of Grand Rapids. It was a really different experience, but very good for a start. And then after that, after the end of my sophomore year, things started to change a little bit, and I actually got a sum analyst position with Spectrum Health, which I ended up not taking because I found another one with Cummins. Cummins is a automotive manufacturing company based in their headquarters are in Indiana. So I actually interned in Columbus under the IT team that focused on marketing and sales. So I was helping them with application development that supports the marketing and sales organization within the IT group. So that was really interesting. And then things started really brightening up in my junior year. That's when I got like a couple of opportunities, and I even got confused at certain times. But also that's around the time when COVID came. So a
Yep.
lot of things were like changing a lot. So right around the time when I was doing my internship at Cummins, I actually interviewed. Uh, I actually interviewed with a firm called Nomura. It's a financial services company right out of New York, it's the largest Japanese bank. And I was fortunate enough to get a position within the global markets division, so that's sales and trading, work with financial products and everything. And I also got an offer from JP Morgan, but I actually ended up taking the offer from Nomura as opposed to JP Morgan because of how the programs they were set up differently. And then later on in the year, I got another one from a company called NetUp, but it got cancelled because of COVID-19, and with Nomura as well, everything was like uh, super uncertain. And that's when I started like thinking outside the box. And I was like, you know what? What if I try something like, I apply for one of the stipends and I do an internship. So I coordinated with someone from my USUP network who runs a startup firm out of Australia. And then we were able to set up an internship program. It was pretty interesting because like whilst I was doing that internship program, Nomura came with sort of like a different plan from what was planned, but they hire for full-time positions from the internship. So they wanted to at least get an opportunity to get a few of us. So we're able to get something like a shorter virtual program where we were mostly like learning about the company and the products and interacting with people, which was really different from what the original internship was supposed to be like. So I ended up checking that up as well, which landed me into my full-time role that I'll be starting in July this year.
So one of the things that has really been fascinating to me about your journey is that so many times as a career coach, I'll talk to students and they have a really difficult time finding internships, and you've not only been able to find them, you've been able to actually find multiples, and you've been able to kind of like leverage others to find better ones and things like that. So the next question I'd like to ask is like, what's been your secret to be consistently finding good internships?
Um, so my secret, I wouldn't say secret per se, but I think one of the biggest things that I did was most of these opportunities that I got. There's a couple of opportunities that I was able to get, but just by applying straight from the online portal. Um, but a lot of it had to do with putting a lot of networking upfront instead of just applying. So one of the things that I did as a first year and second year, I knew a K alumni from Zimbabwe. So I would speak with him and he would help me with my resume. I'll come to the CCPD as well. I remember my first resume that I made, I was helped by Neelam when she was still working at the CCPD. So I did a lot of that kind of stuff like iteratively, like so many times. And with meeting Tendai, he introduced me to other like K alum and other people within his network. I remember one of the guys, his name is Will. He just started his startup right after working at Google for a couple of years. So I was exposed to a lot of those helpful people like early on, because I would like cold email people, cold message people on LinkedIn. And later on, I learned about Wise. I started using that as well. Um, and what was really fascinating about that is like sometimes you meet someone and maybe they're not able to help you, but they might share some knowledge or something, or they'll introduce you to someone else who might be able to help. So I think networking was really a code breaker for me. I used the LinkedIn platform a lot of times. And then I also participated in some organizations that helped me like prepare my interviewing skills, as well as also give me some access. And this is especially good for students from minority backgrounds. One of them is called Modern Guild. Another one is called SEO. And there's a lot of them. I think CCPD once advertised management leadership. I think it's called management leadership for tomorrow or something like that, MLT. Those kinds of opportunities are really good. So like I recommend anybody who can utilize them. Like I say, go for it. So usually it's Black students, students of Hispanic background, LGBTQ, women, and all other minority backgrounds. So those kinds of opportunities also really helped me. I got them on a couple of occasions. And then sometimes I think that with how the applicant tracking systems work, sometimes I feel like it was almost like pure luck, but I had to work to get my documents right, to get picked by those algorithms, because that was really, really tough. The internship I got at NetApp was like me just like blindly applying online. Same thing happened with Cummins, JP Morgan. I applied through a diversity program, and Nomura, I knew about it through Modern Guild. My first year internship, I just applied online. So in Spectrum Health, I just applied online as well. But a lot of it, especially now, like I spend most of my time like networking. I always speak to people, tap into people with my network, people who are international at K, Zimbabweans I see around. Like everywhere I go to the bar or something and I meet people. Like everyone is always got a good direction to point you in. So I always try to throw that in.
One of the things I find that's really interesting about what you just said is that, like, one of the things that we try to consistently coach in the CCPD is the importance of networking, and really specifically two things is that, like, one, the idea of that you don't actually have to be intimidated by networking, because like there is no really like formal like networking meeting. It's just like, no, networking is just talking to people. It's just reaching out and like finding common ground, finding common interests, and then just using that to say like, oh, by the way, like I'm looking to do this. Can you help me? And more often times you find out that a lot of people are just like, the answer is just like, yeah, I'm totally willing to help you.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is that, like, a lot of times what I'll talk to students is like, sometimes the person who you need to actually talk to isn't actually a first level connection or like somebody that you directly know. Sometimes it's actually like a second or third level connection. And sometimes the
Yes.
value of networking is being able to say like, oh, hey, like, can you help me out? And the person's like, you know what? That's actually not really my thing, but I know somebody else who actually does
That's
that. Like,
that's
let me
that's
connect you with them.
always that's always my last question of any networking that I do, whether it was successful in terms of the fact that it worked out in what I was looking for, or it didn't work out. I always ask the question, is there anybody else you'd recommend me talking to? And this could be for two reasons. If I got the opportunity, it's about advancement. How do I advance from here? If I didn't get it, then I missed this one, but what else can I try?
Absolutely. Um, so the next question I'd like to ask is like, with the various internships that you've had along the way, for case students that are listening right now and who are like struggling to find things, like, what are some pieces of advice that you would give them to help them find their own internship opportunities?
Okay, yeah. I think that's a very hard question, but I will say a couple of things that I have managed to do myself that helped me. So number one, the very first step, especially your first year or sophomore, or even juniors and seniors, because I've seen that some people start these things a little later on during their time at K. The first thing you want to do is get your documents right. And that process doesn't stop. Even up to now, I still send my resume to some people to get it reviewed and get looked at. And it's ever improving. You can never actually stop improving it, because that's your, almost your first key, your first passport into actually getting a conversation with a lot of people. So I'll say work really hard to get your resume looking right. And the other thing that comes with it is oftentimes they people are looking for sort of like a baseline level of experience. And oftentimes it's very difficult because you're a junior or you're a sophomore and you don't have any kind of experience. And the way I started is for me to get my very first jobs or anything like that. I started working on campus. That was my very first step because that was within my reach. So with that, I would say anything that you can get your hands on, class projects, um, uh, campus jobs, you can leverage that to go on to the next level. Like I was leveraging everything because I was actually going to the church that I was going to my first year. There was a guy who was running a software company. So I actually volunteered with me and he taught me a few things, which I was able to put on my resume and land my first internship. It was unpaid, but I just wanted to learn, get the experience on my resume. So, I have a springboard in a sense. And employers appreciate that. Like they feel like you're grinding, you're trying hard. So, you know, there's things that, that there's opportunities that come up on campus. If you can work on campus, if you can grab some opportunities like being a TA or something like that, um, unpaid internships, uh, those kind of things are good for a start. It gives you experience so you can use that to springboard onto something else. So it's really about willingness to sort of build that profile initially. And as you go on, I actually started to discover that as my profile became stronger, I had recruiters reaching out to me. But that was never the case. I had to work really, really hard to straighten my documents, build some initial experiences, leverage the projects that we do in class, all that kind of stuff. So I would really recommend that. And the number one thing is don't give up. I've heard someone say that if you hang around a barber shop long enough, you soon get the haircut. And it's a statistical play, right? Obviously, it doesn't always work like that. Sometimes we work super hard and things don't work out. But if you keep trying hard, you're sending as many applications as possible, talking to as many people as possible. At some point, you're gonna learn something, and that's something I learned in my very first internship, which I did in my first year, because it was like marketing and sales. So a big chunk of my day was being told no, and building the resilience to let the no's not phase me out and be able to hold on strongly to the yeses that I get is like a skill that I built out from uh, an earlier stage during my time at K. Always keep shooting because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and you build out your efficiency, you become stronger from there.
One of the things that you said that I really, really like is, you know, the idea of what are things that you can do to fill a skill gap and being creative to find those opportunities. One of the
Yeah.
things as a career coach, I'll frequently talk to students is that like somebody will say like, "Oh, I'm looking for an internship," and I'll look at their resume and they don't have any experience doing any of the things that they're actually applying for, and I'm trying to tell them like, well, if you have this skill gap between like what the internship is asking for and the skills that you currently have, like great ways to do those things are like you said, like what are class projects? Those can go in your resume. Are there relevant coursework that you've taken? Those can go in your resume. But also looking for like those extra things about like, yo, are there just projects that you've just messed around on your own time or just like, hey, this is
Yep.
something that I've
Side
like
project.
been super interested in. Are there things that you have like friends that are just working on like their own side project? Can you just like, oh,
Exactly.
hey, can I hop in on that? And just like get, because you can then leverage those things and put them on your resume. Because oftentimes employers don't necessarily they understand that as a student you're not going to have like 10 years of experience, but they want to just know that you're not starting from absolute zero. So anything at all you can find to kind of like give you that first step is going to go a long way to, like you said, getting that initial foot in the door.
Yeah. And I was actually working with two students from K who are applying for to get in the same internship I got my junior year with the firm I'm going to start with. And I actually just went through this. So one of them was really interested in finance, and one of the things she did was she did an externship program with an alumni who does some finance stuff in Detroit. So she was able to put that on her resume, and I've been watching her for like a year now, and she's only getting better from that. Like now, she's almost like landing an opportunity. But it started from that, like that 1 week externship. It gives you something to demonstrate your interest because at an earlier stage you don't have experience. So employers are looking for that curiosity, that demonstrated interest. And oftentimes you haven't had the chance to demonstrate it through the job because you haven't had the chance to have one because you're still in college. And the other student, we're actually talking because this is a job focused on investments, and he worked as part of the student government at K, and he has been able to get in meetings that were relevant to investments with like the investments committee and stuff. And we're like, you know what? This is really good to have as something you would highlight on your resume or in your interviews, because that's something that demonstrates that you're interested in investments. As far as it's like very far from what the actual job is like, but it's at least some exposure to the environment, and you're demonstrating some interest, even though the interest is remote. So it's you. The key thing is any small bit of anything you can leverage, use it.
So, uh, with that in mind, the follow up question I want to ask you is that, like, so we talked a little bit about like general advice you can give to students. Um, I would like to ask a follow up question about like, is there advice that you can give to international students? Because as you know from your own experience, like it can be a little bit more tricky as an international student to find internships. But like you
Yeah.
said, you've been able to consistently do it every single year. So like, is there any specific advice you give to international students to help them find internships?
Okay. So with international students, it's a completely different ballgame. And I wish many international students can learn this quickly because oftentimes when you're applying, there's a question that says, will you now or in the future require sponsorship for continued employment? And as an international student, you have to pick yes. And a lot of companies, just on the basis of the fact that you said yes, they won't even consider you. So as an international student, your pool of the opportunities you're going to apply to is smaller. So instead of wasting your time on companies that actually don't sponsor work visas, you shouldn't even be, you should just focus on the opportunities that hire international students. And one of the ways you can do that is there's actually a website on Modu. You could go to like h1bdata.com, something like that. H1B is a work visa. You can see companies that have been known to sponsor work visas from the past. And you can also speak to other international students. I was actually speaking to a, a Jamaican student who is a manager in Detroit, graduated from K in 2014. And she gave me a lot of context. She gave me links to like so many other international students. And the reason why I do this is because I know that my first job might not be like my final job. So I still need to be networking and growing. So I'm still doing that. And when you speak to those international students who have been through the same process, they know where other international students have gone to. And that's something you can leverage. So it's almost like you are walking paths that have been walked on by other people already, instead of just going in blindly and applying. And as an international student, the other thing is you're most likely going to have to focus on the big companies because those are usually the ones with mature immigration systems, and they're ready for sponsorship. It's like not a big deal for them. You come in and there's processes to onboard you from the start, from the beginning. But then the smaller companies tend to not do that because that's just a big cost for them. Um, so I would highly encourage that as an international, try to look at the bigger companies, have a more focused or targeted approach. Try to distinguish yourself a little bit more. It's rather unfair, but you know, as you know, for the time that the system is going to be like this, you have to find ways to beat it. You know, targeted approach. Look at the bigger companies. Network more with other international alumni. They often point you in the right direction. So those are the things that I would really advise. And don't despair. I think that's like within my small circle of international students. That's what I like saw. A lot of people would give up because they were just like, I'm international and companies don't hire international students. And the truth is that it's not impossible. It's just more difficult than how it would be for a domestic student. So don't give up. That's key.
I really like everything that you just said there, and the one thing I think I'd like to add on to the end of that is like one of the things I frequently tell international students is like you need to take control of the process, and specifically what I mean by that is like you need to educate yourself on the process of how this is done because
That is extremely important.
right, because like a lot of times, like you said, especially with smaller companies, they think that like it's this huge complicated thing, and it's just like no, not really. You just have to fill out some paperwork and send it in, and then like that's kind of it. And so like the more you can educate yourself in the process, and then when you're talking to people, you can advocate for yourself. I think that also goes a really long way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because some people they don't do it because they don't sponsor internationals because uh, it's not like they don't want to. They just don't know about the process because they've never had to hire an international student before. So if you can actually get to like mix and mingle with people who can influence policy and you understand the process very well, you can explain that.
Absolutely. Um, so a little bit earlier, you mentioned that you did a lot of networking and specifically using platforms like LinkedIn to do that. The
Yeah.
question I'd like to ask you next is just like, LinkedIn, I think, is a great resource to actually find and connect with other alumni. Currently, if there are any students listening and want to know how to do that, we currently have two videos on the CCPD YouTube page that shows you how to actually use the LinkedIn alumni directory, as well as then how to take that information and put that in the K alumni directory and look people up. Both of them are less than 2 minutes long, and you can just find out all that information on youtube.com/KZooCCPD. But the
Okay.
question I'd like to ask you is like, what are the other resources that you've found that helped you along the way that you would recommend to other students?
Okay. So LinkedIn for sure. And something that I learned later on that I wish I had learned about earlier, that's Wiser. Wiser is pretty good because it's like it's people who already say they want to help K students. So it's once again that's a very targeted approach. So you it's not like LinkedIn where you're almost kind of taking a gamble. With Wiser, it's a focused approach. It's targeted. You know that they are ready to help you. So I use LinkedIn. I use Wiser. Um, like I said, I also used some organizations, Modern Guild, especially for my skills training. They help a lot with like consulting, human resources, financial services, tech, like wide variety of industry tracks. Same thing with SEO. That really helped me build the skill set I needed for interviewing and also kind of learn and get some coaching and stuff like that. So I use those too. So yeah, I think that's what I would recommend. It's great opportunities to network even with other students too.
So, uh, for those students who don't know, you've also worked in our office for the past couple of years as a career associate.
Yeah.
So you've been able to talk with a lot of students and like kind of coach them on the process. So the next question I'd like to ask you is like, what's one common myth about interning that you'd wish to debunk, or like something that you hear students doing that like you're like, well, actually that's not true at all, like, and you would advise them to stop doing that?
I think that one common myth about interning is, I think some people think that you need to have like a crazy skill set, or you need to have like a particular major to be able to do a certain internship. But with a lot of research, a lot of companies and roles have actually moved on from that. Obviously, I cannot go and like intern in a medical fashion because that's something that's a little bit more focused, and I cannot do that. But a lot of the times, a lot of these roles, like me being exposed to finance, I've interned with students who didn't study finance. I've interned with one of the top ranking students in my internship cohort was an art history major. And this is like trading. So oftentimes, I think what's being looked for is the ability to learn, demonstrating your interest. So you don't have to be like, you don't have to be at the skill set level that's being talked, that's frequently being talked about. I think that once you can get like, obviously you need enough to get yourself past the interview stage to actually land the offer. But during the internship, most of the times you will be learning new things that you don't even know how to do. And that's really important, even evaluating if you should be given a full-time job offer from that internship. Because oftentimes when you get the new job, everything you're going to be doing for the most part is going to be new. And what they're looking for is the desire to learn, the ability to work in teams, someone who's coachable. And the one that I really hate is about majors. I really hate that one because like people think that, like, I'm going to give this example. People think that to work in finance, you have to have done like finance or business or math. Like, that's absolutely not true. Some of the most successful traders did like political science, or they did like, I've seen people in psychology. And like I said before, like one of the like highest ranking intern in my cohort did art history.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
I kind of mentioned two things, two myths I frequently hear about that.
To me, one of the things that you said that I really, really like is, and that I agree with you, is that a lot of times students think that, like you said, they have to have this crazy skill set or they have to be the perfect candidate. And the thing I know now at 37, having worked a lot of different jobs, is that like overwhelmingly every single job that I've worked, they basically teach you everything you need to know how to do that job
Exactly.
on the job. Really, what they're looking for a lot of times is just like you said, are you coachable? Do you have a good personality? Like, are you a personality fit? Like, do
Exactly.
they enjoy
That's the other
being
thing.
around you?
Culture fit is huge.
Absolutely. You know, and like, can you display that like are able to actually like work to meet deadlines and hit deliverables? Can you prove that like,
Exactly.
what, you're good working in teams? And like, if you can do all that stuff, it's kind of like, oh, don't worry about it, we'll teach you everything once you actually get here.
Yeah. Especially, you actually reminded me, especially the point about culture fit. I almost forgot to mention that. Um, People think that, let's say, if you do an internship and they're hiring for full-time hires from the internship program, some people often make the mistake of thinking that the most uh, technically inclined or the most skilled intern is the one that's going to get the full-time job. And that's absolutely not true, because some people are so skilled, but their personality is not fit for the job at all. One of the things that I often found when I was like reading, I read some books. Like I read one sort of like guide called like Vote Guide to Finance, and like various articles on various platforms and stuff. Like Q&A on Quora, all that kind of stuff. Reddit, you name it. And one guy actually put it as, a lot of the times, some of these guys are just looking for, because you're gonna sit with them for sometimes for over 8 hours of the day with them. So someone put it as, uh, can I sit in the airport with you for 10 hours or 8 hours and, not have a terrible day? Or, can I actually go grab a beer with you after work or something? Because in a lot of times, like small things like that, being personable are good for business. They are good for the environment. So like culture fit, personality fit, those things play into like this kind of stuff a lot.
Absolutely. And I will even say, as somebody who personally, I am a classical introvert. So, like, the things that we're talking about, you don't need to necessarily be like the most extroverted and like the most gregarious
Oh
person.
no, you
No, it's
don't
just
need
like,
to be.
no, can you just be nice? Can you carry on a
Exactly.
conversation? When people come in on Monday, like, can you say, like, oh, hey, how was your weekend? And can you, like, talk about
Yeah,
things and have, like, mutual interest in things? Because if you can do that, like I said, a lot of those things, you know, because a lot of times people don't realize is that, like, once you graduate college and you start working, you start seeing your friends less. Um, your coworkers end up being some of the people who you're going to end up spending the most time with.
yeah,
And like you said, just being around people who just like, yeah, I just like this person and I like having them part of the team. And when it's time to go to lunch, I'm like, oh yeah, I can totally go
you
to
want to
lunch with
go to
Rukudzo and
lunch?
we could just sit down and just like chop it up for 40 minutes. And we don't have to be best friends, but we could just have lunch
Exactly.
and talk. And like that stuff goes so far. And like you said, more oftentimes, at least in my experience, a lot of times, I wouldn't say necessarily it's across the board, but one of the things I've not only in my experience, but also that I hear from recruiters that like a lot of times companies would rather hire like a 10 out of 10 personality fit and like a 7 or 8 out of 10 skill fit versus like
Yeah,
a 10 out of 10 skill fit and like a 5 or a 6 personality fit.
exactly. Exactly. That's really profound right there. That's like, yeah, that's really powerful.
So, as we start getting toward the end of this interview, uh, coming up this eighth week, we are having a senior week where we're spending a lot of time like talking to our current seniors and helping them, those who don't know what they want to do, figure out what their next step is going to be. So, what is one piece of advice that you give to fellow seniors that are still on the job hunt right now?
Yeah. I think that one of the things I see in a lot of seniors, is that a lot of people, um, they haven't really, figure out quite yet what they want to do, in terms of, even at the targeting stage of your job search or application process. They're still trying to find out what kind of career track can I do, what do I like. I would say that one of the most powerful things I've been told is that your first destination doesn't have to be your final destination. So, I think that one of the best things you can do for yourself is research on a couple of career tracks, maybe two, three, four, five, that sort of interest you at basic level. Kind of find out what they're all about, and even better if you can speak to people who are already in the field, and then kind of narrow down your search into focusing on maybe two or three things, and then whatever you end up landing, kind of assess like, do you like this? Are you satisfied, or do you want to try something new? Because that's the thing. We're so young and we have the opportunity to be mobile, find out what we really like. Because like I firmly believe that your first destination doesn't have to be your final destination. You don't have to be logged in there, but at least you get somewhere. You start from somewhere. What everybody's going through is a normal part of the experience. It doesn't dictate your future 10 years from now. So I would say um, congratulations to everyone. You've gone so far, and you are at a this point in time. Just take some time to kind of find out what you want. Start from somewhere, and know that that's not that might not be your final destination. And good for you if that's going to be something you're going to do for the next 20 years. um but yeah, I would say Yeah, I think that's one of the most profound things I've been told. I actually, when I was a career associate, I actually once did a research project where we're finding out uh, where our various alumni are, and we're looking at some fields like healthcare or like nursing or people who did like medicine and stuff like that. And when I was like, some of the things that surprised me the most when I was searching up on LinkedIn and looking at what a lot of people did, I found that like some people, what they studied in college, what they did for the first few years in their career, and what they're doing now, those three things are like worlds apart.
Absolutely.
I saw one lady, um, I think, uh, I think she just donated money to the college or something like that. I think I read something on LinkedIn recently. And the lady went to K College long back, studied English. After studying English, actually started working in a sort of in media, then transitioned from media into doing an MBA in finance, then working for like a finance company, and then ended up like doing her own finance company. But who would have thought that someone who studied English is now a hedge fund manager?
Sure.
So I say, be flexible, be open, follow what you like, follow what gives you happiness, and, take your time, don't beat yourself down. Like I said, hang around the barbershop long enough, you soon get your hair cut. So, keep trying, keep pushing, and, you'll find your niche.
One of the things I really like about what you said, and one of the ways that I often like to frame it for students is that, like, it's not about what you're going to do with the rest of your life. It's just about what you're going to do next. And like you said, you can do something, and if you graduate, you can find it and you try it for like a year or two, and you figure out, like, I don't like this. Like, okay, just go do something else. And to me, like,
Yeah,
I think one of the things that students don't necessarily think about is that, like, when you're younger, it's so much easier to make those pivots when you don't have a family and you don't have to think about, like, oh, where can I move, because, like, I have my partner and they also need to be able to find a job wherever we go, or, like, I
yeah,
have kids, and, like, do I want to pull them out of, like, the school and take them away from their friends and go to, like, when you're younger, you don't have to worry about any of those things, or, like, you don't actually own a house, you don't have to worry about, like, oh, now we have to figure out how to sell this house and make, is the
yeah,
market good? It's just like, nah. You move to New York, you work, you find out that, like, oh, you know what, after 2 years I don't like living in New York. Like, okay, go move to
yeah,
Seattle, do something else. Like, it's totally fine, that
yeah.
is an option.
That actually reminds me. So I recently joined this platform called Clubhouse, where people just talk about things like a voice only, kind of like house party.
Sure.
And I was talking to this guy. He's from Zimbabwe and he's based in Australia. And he was saying he studied finance, worked for a hedge fund for a couple of years. He actually did this certification, which is quite revered in finance, called CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst. And he did like first exam, second exam. He didn't do the third one because whilst he was doing it, he was like, I hate my job. I want to work with kids. So now he went back to school and he did a master's in social work. Now he's a social worker. It's like, I've never been more fulfilled in my life. I love what I do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's actually a great note to end on. Thank you for taking the time to hop on the podcast with me, and I'm so looking forward to see what you're going to do next with your career.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This was a really good set of questions.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun.